And it has been a year like no other. Who would have thought at the beginning, that was last March, that we would still be dealing with a pandemic 1 year later?
Most of us thought we would be back to normal in a few months, by the summer or fall at the latest. But here we are acknowledging a full year of sickness, loss, isolation, and fear.
The feeling of anxiety and fear of the unknown at that point was really palpable.
There are a lot of things about this pandemic that we just could not foresee.
But it wasn't all bad. This past year has also shown us the best in people, especially our first responders, who have worked tirelessly to nurse us back to health, and they are not done yet.
The virus isn't gone anywhere until it's gone everywhere. And we need to make sure that this virus is snuffed out, just like we did smallpox years ago.
Medical professionals want to make sure we don't drop the ball now as we get so close to emerging from this public health crisis. At this point, we all know someone who's been impacted by the virus. It affects not just those who fought for their lives, but also their loved ones. Rosie Coleman was in the hospital for about 3 months, much of that time in ICU on a ventilator. She doesn't remember a lot from that time, but her son sure does.
It was a very difficult time, very challenging, because it tests your faith.
For months, Napoleon Coleman didn't know if his mother would make it. When she finally came off the ventilator and was moved out of ICU, her children and grandchildren were joyous.
We was really elated about it. I mean, just going to see her before we even got her home and going up there every night and at least, being to hold her hand, pray with her, talk to her. You just elated about it.
When she was released from the rehabilitation center in January, the long road to recovery moved to her home. She lost a lot of strength and must relearn basic tasks.
The nurse came today and she showed me how to put on my socks and my shoes because my daughter was putting on my shoes and socks.
The once independent 75-year-old is still feisty, but needs round-the-clock care. She's grateful her large family is able to share the responsibility. They take shifts to stay with her.
Before my mom went to the hospital, she pretty much stayed by herself, was able to cook and kind of straighten up. We just come in, check on her, make sure she get her medicines and stuff like that. So going from that to being a 24-hour, you got to have somebody here. It's overwhelming at times.
But Miss Coleman is optimistic. She has faith she'll be independent again someday.
The people is praying for me and they still praying for me. And I believe I'll get back where I was. And I'll be glad when I get back where I was.
Over the last year, our state has lost 10,299 people to COVID-19, devastating family after family. Tonight, I checked back in with a woman who lost her mother to COVID-19 last spring. Her mom was a nurse who had a passion and a calling for helping others.
We're still trying to figure out how to live with that mother here with us.
A painful reality that Amanda Williams knows many families are trying to navigate. Amanda lost her mom, 60-year-old Rose Harrison, in April in the early weeks of the pandemic.
Her heart, her big heart, she was such a giving person. She literally lived for her family. And I say that all the time. She lived for her family, lived for her friends, lived for her work, family, and her residents.
Rose was a nurse, and Amanda says her mom cared for patients in her final days before she herself was in the hospital and on a ventilator. Amanda and her family also became sick with COVID, which even limited how they were able to say their goodbyes.
We were in quarantine in our home for about 6 to 8 weeks total, and we had to delay Mother's funeral. So I actually had COVID at the time of Mother's funeral. So we all had to, participate in Mother's funeral from our vehicle. So that was pretty tough.
Amanda is also a nurse, but left her job after her mother's passing.
It was very difficult to be right back into the COVID realm of healthcare when I just saw it devastate our lives and take my mother.
Months later, Amanda decided she needed to be back caring for patients.
I feel like I've been led here back into the long-term care field for a purpose.
As Amanda and her family struggle with their new reality, she also wrestles with questions about how things could have been.
I do believe that if Mother would have contracted the virus like right now, that it would have been a different story for her.
Today, she is focused on helping her patients, her family, and working to honor her mother in the way she lives every single day.
Mother would not want us to live in fear, so we've kind of tried to move on and, still social distance and still wear our mask when we're in close proximity to folks and do the best we can, live every single day as it might be your last, and make sure you tell those that you love them, because you might not get a second chance.
Amanda also tells me she now has 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, something she struggled with a bit, but ultimately said if it helped protect her, her family, and her patients, she had no choice but to do it. Education has taken a hit throughout this pandemic. It's been a really tough year on teachers, students, and parents.
Now, many schools opted for all virtual or a hybrid form of remote and in-person learning. It forced many educators and students out of their comfort zone.
Older teachers who have been in the classroom for a long time did not have any college courses on technology in the classroom. And the newer teachers never had a class on how to do this because nobody was able to foresee this or to predict that this would happen.
Hayward says as difficult as the last year has been, she believes education is better because of it. Schools are better equipped and teachers now have experience that'll help students who may need to learn from home at some point in the future.
The pandemic also brought a halt to traditional rites of passage for graduating seniors. The school year was really like no other, changing events from prom and graduation and really making all those events different, like drive-by graduations, and some celebrated with yard signs. There were dozens of schools, both in high school and college, that did eventually host socially distanced graduation ceremonies. Football world also very different. Fewer fans able to go in the stadiums and watch in-person games. Auburn, Alabama, and UAB, just to name a few. There's also been more testing for players, and even Alabama coach Nick Saban missing the Iron Bowl after testing positive for COVID-19.
When the pandemic started, the Northeast saw the first mass cases. It was chaotic back then. A Birmingham ICU nurse actually ran toward that chaos to try and help. Tabitha Harper is a traveling nurse now working with very ill COVID patients in Salt Lake City. Last March, she volunteered to go to Massachusetts at the height of the outbreak there.
I mean, I've seen sick patients as an ICU nurse, but they were just extremely, extremely ill. And it wasn't just a couple of patients on the unit, it was the entire unit.
She was working up to 60 hours a week, and during just 6 weeks there, she lost dozens and dozens of patients and only saw a few recover.
Once they're intubated in the ICU with us, the chance of recovery is pretty slim. It's just a different kind of emotional and mental tax right now.
She says it's also difficult witnessing the agony of the families who aren't allowed to be there with their loved one in their final hours. She remembers one family saying goodbye to a young patient through FaceTime.
For like 2 hours, they just sat on FaceTime with him, looking at him. I mean, he was sedated, unaware, but they just talked to him, and the mom got me to hold his hand and rub his forehead one time when I went in, and it tugs at your heartstrings for sure.
After her time in Massachusetts, Tabitha says her emotional tank was empty and she had to step away from traveling nurses for 6 months before she was mentally able to go back on the road. Now, Tabitha says she hopes all medical workers are taking advantages of the resources available to them for their mental and emotional well-being.
1 year ago, just finding out if you had COVID was difficult because there was a shortage of tests and very few testing sites.
As you can imagine, the logistics of organizing drive-through testing clinics were challenging. The first UAB mass testing site opened in a downtown parking lot last March. A group at the hospital put it together in 4 days. That first week, they tested more than 200 people a day. But as the pandemic wore on, they became much more efficient.
The most we did in 2.5 hours was 500. So when you think about like a clinic, that's a high volume of patients to push through in 2.5 hours, just from a logistics perspective. But we even calculated that on average, most of our patients were in and out within 10 minutes.
Anissa Jaya had no experience with the daunting task of setting up a clinic, but she wasn't working in her normal UAB management position at the time because of the pandemic. So she and other professionals like her volunteered to spearhead the effort, and they did it in record time.
I remember just going to work and feeling like I was part of something bigger than me. All of us had a calling in a weird way. I know it sounds cliche to say it, but we all came there to help. And so I felt privileged to just be part of that and be asked to be part of it.
Oh, we are all washing our hands and other surfaces more often and really just thinking about cleanliness and germs more these days. That's even more critical in hospitals and doctors' offices. The environmental services staff at UAB has grown during this pandemic. Now there are more than 500 people cleaning and sanitizing everything to keep the virus from spreading. They have always known how important their jobs are. Now the rest of us are realizing that as well. They say they try to clean patient rooms as if they'd be the ones sleeping in it. Social distancing and masks have made connecting with one another a bit challenging this past year.
Yeah, a UAB oncologist mentioned to his family how difficult it was to interact with and empathize with his patients when they couldn't see his facial expressions. His teenage daughter listened and came up with a unique solution.
We used to shake everybody's hand and give our patients hugs, and now there's almost no contact without smiling or being able to show emotion. I think that has made the doctor-patient interaction more difficult.
Dr. Strawn is a gynecologic oncologist. His patients are often dealing with serious medical issues. Now, thanks to his daughter Emily, his patients can see his reassuring smile, not through his mask, but on his lapel button.
They say under my mask is my smile, and this is one of myself.
Emily bought the equipment and supplies to make the buttons for the nurses and doctors in her dad's medical office, but it's grown well beyond that. She's made about 800 so far, and the requests have been coming in from all over UAB and even from other states.
I just wanted to have some way for the patients and doctors relationship to be held because of the mask holding them back from doing that.
It's been a way, I think, to develop that relationship with patients that oftentimes is built on making them feel comfortable or, helping them relax.
She doesn't charge for the buttons, but says several groups have donated to ovarian cancer research to pay the gift forward. Now, Dr. Strawn says he and Emily make the buttons together after school and work, so he says it's also a bonding time for them. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, and just kind of reassuring, as they mentioned, under the mask, they're smiling, and just, another way to connect.
Absolutely.
A lot more to come here tonight. Dr. Michael Sagg, a doctor on the front lines and a COVID survivor. His take on our turbulent journey through the pandemic and the hope he sees ahead.
And I understand that. They just did not understand. They did not know. And I didn't know. And so I think they were frightened.
Moving into unknown territory, fear and panic settled in at the start of the pandemic, creating scary encounters for those who tested positive.